It was an ordinary December evening, distinguished from 100 others only by the fact that exactly a week later the new year was coming. The streets of the metropolis glowed even brighter. It was impossible to push through in the underground. The roads were crowded with cars, and yet, excited by the incomprehensive joy, people were shopping fuzzily, buying up even old stock and forming huge queues. Elijah never understood the essence of this holiday. He didn't wait for the chimes to strike and did not make a wish. Unless in a faraway childhood, being in an orphanage. Then he, a small blonde and blue-eyed boy, secretly from the teachers, would creep up to the forged window and carefully write out 2 words, Mom and Dad. He hoped that one day Santa Claus will fulfill his dream of a real, full family. But the miracle didn't happen. And once, even these ghostly dreams melted away. The teacher, Mrs. Noble, entered the room very quietly and screamed, seeing the pupil at the window. "Get out from there, you bastard! Only recently we've showed the windows with a curtain. Do you take them out again? Don't you appreciate the work of adults? No wonder your parents have abandoned you." A heavy woman, shuffling her slippers, quickly approached Elijah, grabbed him by the ear, and looked angrily in his eyes. "Will you still climb up the windowsill?" The child clenched its teeth, but didn't squeak or utter a word. For a moment, the teacher seemed to feel sorry for the child, or afraid. She loosened her grip and abruptly spread out the bed, throwing Elijah on it. "Everyone to bed! My goodness! Knee-high to grasshopper, but has already wolf looks. Future criminal, I guess. And why do mothers give birth to someone like you? There are thousands of normal women who can't become mothers. And then here you are. Oh, damn you!" She slammed the door as she left, still muttering to herself. Since then, Elijah stopped believing in miracles, and the new year began to anger him. At this time, he found himself thinking that he was becoming somewhat sentimental, which, for a successful businessman, wasn't like him at all. So, in order to throw out the flow of unnecessary memories, a man has acquired a tradition to get drunk on New Year's Eve. His subordinates knew that the chief should not be disturbed at this time, even if there was an earthquake. Usually strict, working 7 days a week, overly punctual manager for a few days would turn into a kind of recluse, getting drunk, alone in front of the TV, and not responding to calls. This was a kind of reset that happened to him only once a year. That evening, Elijah also planned to go to the usually luxury store to refill his bar. Somehow parking a new Mazda and several times cursing at the lazy-city janitors who couldn't properly clean the snow, the young man went to the shopping center. The weather was nasty. A gust of cold wind whipped his face with a portion of prickly snow mixed with rain. For a couple of minutes, the skin turned red and became as if burned. Elijah hastened his already hurried steps when suddenly he felt someone's eyes on him. Looking away, he saw an elderly woman holding a little girl tightly. The woman's shawl was almost completely wet. The skin of her cheeks was red, and her lips were badly chapped. The girl, dressed in a threadbare jumpsuit, was also shivering from the cold, but she wasn't crying. At some point, in the man's memory flashed memories of himself, of the time when he was in an orphanage. All this happened in a split second. Elijah went into a warm store where a smiling sales consultant, seeing a regular customer, began to tell him about new products and special shopping offers that is available only today. But completely different thoughts were spinning in the head of Elijah. He felt sick in the room, smelling of expensive coffee, tangerines, perfume, and something fake. as if he only now realized that all this ostentatious politeness and goodwill just the desire of sellers to impose their service and get a good percentage as a salary increase. Without buying anything, he walked quickly to the exit. The disappointed saleswoman, not wanting to miss the fat customer, was still shouting after him, "Young man, I will give you a good personal discount." For a moment, he turned and said, "A lie. Everything is a lie." When he reached the street, he went to the old lady and the girl standing alone. Silently, he looked into the child's eyes. The girl's eyelashes were almost completely covered with frost, and vascular markings were clearly visible on her thin cheeks. She coughed slightly and looked at the man curiously. He would have recognized that look out of 1,000, and he knew what it meant. It wasn't doom or anger or fear. No, this is an armor, a protective reaction of the psyche, something similar to a state of shock. When in some negative situations, a person outwardly remains completely calm, as if he goes deep into himself, saying to the world, "You can hurt me from the outside, but what's inside will be mine." The woman standing next to the girl tensed slightly, but didn't try to move or block the child from the stranger. She also looked at him with a strange, detached look. It was as if she tried to recall where she had seen him before, but she was lost in the depths of her memory and couldn't find the answer. "Do you need help? Are you cold? Do you remember where you live?" The woman carefully watched Elijah's lips when he spoke and even tried to answer something. But in the end, it turned out only a weak mumble. It was obvious that the woman was very tired and ill. "Okay, let's go to my car. You will warm up and then we will decide what to do with you." The woman obeyed. Slowly moving her stiff and frozen legs, she followed the young man, since she was no longer able to stand. Always flexible and calculating mind of Elijah, at this moment, as it seemed to him, entered into a struggle with itself. At the same time, he thought that he could already relax in the warm jacuzzi with a bottle of his favorite drink, and that he needed to urgently call his classmate George, who worked in a large clinic. On the way home, Elijah managed to call the children's pediatrician, Jessica, with whom he had a brief affair. She immediately agreed to meet, despite the fact that more than 3 months had passed since their last meeting. "Don't pay attention to the mess. It's still a bachelor," Elijah said, as if to justify himself to unexpected guests, and led them into his apartment. The woman, very carefully, as if walking through a minefield, entered the room, holding the child tightly in her arms. A few hours later, thanks to Elijah's contacts, several problems were solved at once. It turned out that the baby, in general, was healthy, but slightly behind in development, and had a small underweight. With the woman, it was a little more complicated. Elijah's friend determined that she was in a state of shock, characteristic of some strong nervous strain. She couldn't remember how she and the girl had ended up on the street, or what her name was. The police reports were also silent. In order to rehabilitate the stranger, Elijah agreed with a private clinic, and his friend Jessica, who happened to be on vacation, took care of the child. A month passed. The woman was getting better day by day. Thanks to the correct treatment, memory began to return. It turned out that her name was Lucy, and the girl in her arms was her granddaughter Kate. Learning the story of how they ended up on the street, Elijah was horrified. It turned out that evening, the daughter of Lucy and her son-in-law once again drank too much. Worried about her granddaughter, a woman made a remark to negligence parents. The son-in-law immediately put his fist to her face. She lay unconscious in the corridor for a while, and somehow got up, seized the moment, dressed the crying and hungry granddaughter, and went out into the street to somehow save the child. Elijah decided to help the woman with the documents recovery. He did not fully understand what force was driving him. After all, before he was never interested in charity and was indifferent to the homeless. What made him pay attention to someone else's grief that night? He didn't know the answer to that question. But he had a strange feeling. It was as if somehow an old puzzle had finally come together and some important parts were missing. The man caught himself thinking that he was trying not to stay in the office late, became more permissive to the subordinates, and the funniest thing was that when he approached the apartment, he carefully sniffed to make out what dish he would be pleased with today by Lucy. And he, who proudly refers to himself as a child-free, really missed little Kate, and sincerely rejoiced at her small successes. Perhaps it was all like the real family he'd missed as a child. Lucy also felt a great sense of gratitude to Elijah, but at the same time, something strongly worried her, and for a long time she couldn't understand what exactly it was. Perhaps the fact that her savior was very similar to her first love, which happened almost 30 years ago, and even the birthmark on his arm was the same. Once Elijah had to stay late at work. As he opened the door softly not to wake anyone, he was surprised to see that the kitchen light was on, and he could hear women's voices. And Lucy told her life story to Jessica, with whom they became friends, thanks to little Kate. Unable to overcome his curiosity, Elijah listened before entering the kitchen. "I am very grateful to Elijah. I don't even know why he deals with us," the woman sobbed. "Actually, I'm not as holy as he thinks. Everything in life was... Maybe my daughter's drinking and acting like this is some kind of punishment for my sins. After all, I once betrayed the person closest to me, my son. And this cross, this mistake, will have to be carried to the end." Jessica interrupted Lucy, not listening to the end and trying to calm her down. "Lucy, what are you doing? Stop blaming yourself. You can't imagine how Elijah changed with your appearance. I've known him for 5 years, but I've never seen him so happy, contented. And how his eyes sparkle. You, in some amazing way, affect him. Maybe he didn't tell you, but he grew up in an orphanage." Listening to this conversation, Elijah already wanted to enter the kitchen to interrupt Jessica's chatter, but something stopped him. Oh, he would have been a fine son. I would very much like to have such a son. It was painful for the woman to speak. She was almost choking with tears. "The fact is that 30 years ago I was in love with a man. Got pregnant. Wedding was coming. Met my parents. But suddenly it's like he'd been a different person. Just one day before the wedding he told me that there would be no relationship between us. And he completely cut off communication. It was very painful, but I carried the baby. I gave birth in November the 10th, and after the birth he came to me in the hospital and said that he was already married and his new passion is expecting a child. A month before that, my mother had died. Apparently, hormones and nervous overstrain have done their job. I cried for 5 days. The milk was gone. The nurse, feeling sorry for me, offered to write a refusal from the child, saying that if I changed my mind, I could take it away. I didn't take it. since I just wouldn't have anything to feed him with. I don't know if he's alive or what his fate is, and in general, how the earth carries me, although maybe he grew up in a normal family. Jessica didn't know what to say. Lucy only sobbed softly. Elijah almost stopped breathing. His heart was pounding and aching, his temples was tight, and his head was spinning. It can't be. He croaked. He clutched his hat, sitting on a puff near the front door. Frightened and discouraged by the sudden appearance of Elijah, the woman jumped up and ran out into the corridor. "What's it, Elijah?" "Lucy and I've been sitting too long because I was giving Kate a massage." "Lucy, your maiden name is Light?" Elijah asked, not in his own voice. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. Then her mouth opened automatically. "Ellie," she managed to say before she slid down the wall in the corridor. Lucy came to herself from the smell of ammonia, carefully presented by Jessica. "Don't frighten us like that," she said in a trembling voice. As it turned out, Elijah, even as a child, purely by chance, learned the name of the mother who left him. No, he didn't try to find her, like many other children in the orphanage. He accepted that his parents did not need him and did not want to appear in their lives, so as not to be completely disappointed. And now, in front of him, there was his mother. How could this be possible? Having calmed down a little, the mother and son found in adulthood began to think about how to live further. Elijah was categorically against that mother and niece would return to the apartment to find their drinking sister. With the help of a team of lawyers, he deprived Kate's mother of her parental rights and sent her to compulsory treatment. Her roommate was also expelled from the apartment. After cleaning and a small cosmetic repair, the empty living space was successfully rented out. Elijah, won over by Jessica's disinterested attitude to his family, as well as by the way she became attached to Kate, made her an official proposal of marriage. Soon, they adopted the girl, as the mother could not do it, due to age and illness. The youngest daughter of Lucy, who left the clinic, appeared in their lives only once, calling on the phone in the middle of the night and asking, "Do you have any money?" She was never to be seen again. They say that she went to another city, starting from scratch with a new roommate. Soon, Elijah and Jessica had a son, with the same blue eyes as Lucy, Elijah, and Kate had. They called him John, which means God is gracious. Who knows how the life of this family would have turned out if it hadn't been for an unexpected combination of circumstances and mercy shown. Thank you for listening to the rest of the story. Subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and leave your comments. See you soon.